Yeah, me and Leah would
That's
be the
lovely.
only black girls on the team, and we'd have like men approach us abroad, and we had
Mm,
people feel our skin and take photos of us and stuff
yeah.
before it really was such a thing of like no one spoke about it.
Hey everyone, it's me again, Daniel. I'm a Hungarian national team fencer, and today we have a very, very special guest, Ayesha Fihosy, one of my teammates from when I fenced for Great Britain, but now she's gone on to amazing things and is now a director at England Fencing. So, Ayesha, welcome, it's great to see you.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here, and I'm really glad you asked me to join.
Obviously, I've mentioned already that you're a fencer, you still are a fencer, that's not going to change, but now you've got this special role at England Fencing. So could you tell us a little about what you do, or what is this role that you're now involved in?
So the role involves me obviously being in discussion with other directors on the board for any new changes that come about within the England fencing, and also to determine where our budget goes as well. And because my main priority is to include and increase diversity inclusion within the sport, I will be trying to work with some charities to introduce fencing into maybe the lower economic areas and places where people may not have heard of fencing, or maybe can't afford the equipment, or just to get more people involved, whether it be disabled, black people, Asian people, etc. So that's my
That is super. You really got into a really big topic there, especially at this time, like you mentioned, with Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And I'm just interested, obviously I know you as a fencer primarily, but is your career in fencing still going to continue, or are you now going to focus more on this side of the sport, off the piste?
I think for me that's a bit of a difficult question. Of course, I still want to train and spar and maybe do a few domestic competitions. But in terms of international competitions, I might have to hold back on that a little bit, because I want to concentrate on the changes that I want to bring about. I know there's a few young fencers as well that I wouldn't necessarily want them to experience the same things I have. And in order for that to happen, I would like these changes to come about.
Yeah, that's super. It's great we finally have a voice and someone who actually cares about this sort of stuff. So if we're actually going to break down fencing a little bit, we kind of know that it's this kind of like stereotyped, white, elitist, private school sport, according to like the media, or just people who think of fencing, or they might even think of like in your back garden, which is like the next step down for me.
Yeah.
How are you going to bring about the changes? Like, how do you intend to increase diversity and inclusion in the sport? Like, what are your like short-term, maybe long-term ideas, or maybe just ideas in general? Because obviously, I know you've only been there for 2 months. Like, it's not you're going to have the end answer right now. Like, just where's your head at with that sort of stuff of diversity, inclusion, participation?
I think for me, the first thing that I need to focus on is educating people. So whether that be people within the sport of fencing and people outside of fencing that, like you said, have this stereotype view of what fencing is like. So I think for me, I really want to increase awareness. So get fencing out there more on social media so people can see that it's not just white people that are involved. You've got other people involved in the sport as well, and maybe some people might feel more welcomed and may feel like there are other people that look like them within the sport that they can relate to. Because I know that me being starting fencing since I was the age of 12, I was the only fencer that was black sometimes at competitions, and it did make me feel a bit lonely at times. So yeah, I would like to increase awareness within the sport by putting it out there on social media, and again introducing it to areas that may not know about fencing. So yeah, that would be my first step.
It's great you mentioned like areas, because especially from my understanding of the sport in the UK, being from Manchester, if you can recognise English accents that well, that fencing is quite London centric. A lot of money is around London. The Leon Paul Centre, of course, it's in London. Everything is London based. Maybe like Cornwall is an exception with Truro Fencing Club, with John Southfield's work, very strong in sabre, but we tend to see quite a lack of focus elsewhere. Is that something you'd like to see addressed, or do you have any ideas already going forward with maybe participation rates across the UK, or is that something that's in the future?
I think that's such a great point to raise, because it's true. Most of the main training centres are in London. The main fencing camps are in London, and even the main competitions are in London as well.
Yeah.
But I think especially with COVID coming about and everyone interacting more through social media, maybe the communication between areas like London and Edinburgh and Manchester, like you mentioned, could be improved by social media. We could have more training sessions virtually, maybe, to bring people together, where where people will be unable to travel such a long distance that might be quite expensive. You could just open your laptop and have a training session from home. And that way we're all interacting and all improving our skills whilst being at home. So
especially the luxury of being at home as well. You can just really do whatever you want. Definitely. And it's great what you said there, because then you don't have to feel like you belong to a specific place, like, oh, I'm in Manchester, therefore I can't be with the Londoners. It's kind of like time space. It's kind of that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And just talking about participation, obviously, what would you say to a beginner who's teased with fencing? They've looked at it and they thought, that's quite decent. What would you say to them is beautiful about this sport? Why fencing? Why do we do it?
Oh, so many reasons. I think for me, obviously, I'm so biased, but it really is such a beautiful sport, isn't it? It really, really is. It's so different. And if I was speaking to a beginner, I would say, you know, when you're at school and you're playing netball and all those sorts of sports, it's not, with fencing, it's an individual sport as well as a team sport.
Yeah, that's a massive sport.
Yeah, and the skills from, you know, fencing as on your own, you can take to, you know, fencing in a team. It's just, I honestly just think it's such a beautiful sport, and it's so different to every other sport that I've tried at school. And I always find making my way back to the sport, even after a break.
You can't escape from it. It's got us on a leash. Like, it's where you kind of like, oh, what would happen if I'd have done something different? But I wouldn't change it still. Like, it's just so good. And I really like the point you mentioned that it's a team sport as well. People view it as this kind of like, you're on your own, mask on, peace, go kill them. It's not really, it's not that, is it?
It's not. And I love how, even though on the piste it can be so competitive, and you think that your opponent is like your worst enemy, but as soon as you take that mask off, you could just be the best of friends. And I just love that.
Obviously in the sport we'd have to fence our teammates sometimes at domestic competitions, but like you just very well put, like, the mask is on, you're in the zone. Mask is off, you've got your support group, your family, your friends. It's such a nice sport to just do together, but people don't realise that, unfortunately.
And you know what? The point you made is so good about putting the mask on, because whenever I have my mask on, whether I've had a stressful day at work or, you know, a stressful day at uni, as soon as my mask goes on, I kind of just enter this new, completely different world where I'm able to just block out all the stresses and just focus on what's in front of me. And that's part of the beauty of the sport, really.
Yeah. So what are your ideas or thoughts on potentially moving towards fencing being accessible for people who are like amateurs? They don't want to do fencing to necessarily be the next champion. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think I've got quite a few opinions on this, actually, because I think there's a lot of pressure as soon as you enter the sport. Immediately it's, oh, you must enter this competition and do this, X, Y, and Z. Whereas sometimes, like you said, it's nice at a weekend just to have a sparring match or just to train, you know. So I think the pressure should be addressed, definitely. And the most obvious one is costs. Like, fencing is a very expensive sport, and it's probably easier to rent a racket, buy a racket, and go down to, you know, your local gym or outside and play tennis. But it's different for fencing. You can't just find a fencing sword or find a fencing jacket and fence. You've got to get the equipment, and that's where the expense comes in. So I think there needs to be more support for those who probably can't afford to get involved. And when that support comes in, then maybe more people will get involved in the sport on a casual and beginner basis.
And based on that support idea you were talking about just then, do you think that should be support from England Fencing, or do you think, just as an idea off the top of my head, it could be we could host more like send-your-old kit in days, or because I know from a fence I've got tons of masks and jackets I've grown out of because I don't grow as much anymore, but between like the age of 13 and 17 I went from like 5'9" to like 6'1", so like I have like stuff I'm not using anymore, and I've given that back into my club, but other people perhaps might be sitting on it at home. So like, how could we try and influence more people to give back into the community in a way? Like, what can we do?
I think, again, it comes down to probably interacting with each other and communicating with each other. I've come across actually a few pages, whether it be on Facebook or Instagram, of people just uploading old equipment that they don't use anymore for those who are probably less advantaged and can probably buy those equipment at a cheap price. So yeah, it really does come down to communicating with each other, because we need to know what others have, what others don't have, and that's where we can help others within our fencing community.
And it really links to that point you just said before about social media, how right now, especially in this online world, we can really reap the advantages of connecting people, because you never know who that could help later on just through that connection.
Definitely.
So people, if you're watching this, get involved. Like, every voice does matter. If you put them all together, we do get a bit of more unity through the UK and break this kind of London centrism, which isn't a necessarily bad thing. Obviously, you're a Londoner, you've enjoyed these amazing things, but just for like my story, just in the Manchester, we really had problems just trying to get people involved because we just couldn't because of the costs. But if people have these things, sorry.
And that's obviously me being a director now, of course, it's going to be my responsibility to try and make sure that these things can be seen to. However, it is also the responsibility of others, members within the community, to come together and help us achieve these goals as well.
Yes. You've got to start somewhere, and you've really kick-started something.
Yeah.
So that's really, really good.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to move on towards, again, getting involved in fencing, but from a different angle. People might be raising the question at this point, like, okay, we've talked about equipment, we've talked about it being fun, but what are the kind of non-health benefits of fencing? Because sometimes people just view sport and activity as, I need to lose weight, or, I'm just going to go do this with my friends. But you and I both know fencing really does change your life off the piste. Just an example from an athlete's perspective, you and I will know that fencing will improve our time management skills. Like, we need to balance competition, training, sleep, social life, university work all together. Now director work. It's quite a big mix. But what can you say for people that are hesitant on trying fencing or don't know the full benefits of fencing, what the non-health benefits of fencing are?
So I would say, obviously, the main ones like time management and everything else comes into play, but I would definitely say determination and motivation comes into play as well. Fencing it's like a betting sport. It's so risky as well. You can train Monday to Friday, God knows how many hours a week, attend a competition and still lose, because you come across, meet a fencer who is just stronger than you, or
as well. Like
or unfortunately you draw someone who is quite good earlier on in the day and get kicked out, and that's where your motivation comes in to go back home and go back and improve your skills and push yourself to achieve more, because it's so easy to throw the towel in. So yeah, fencing definitely has improved my determination and motivation and increased it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely see that with the new post you've taken on. I mean, just to return to like an earlier question, did you see the Black Lives Matter movement spark your interest in this, or is this something that in the back of your mind you've always had, like, oh, I wish I would do something differently? Did the Black Lives Matter movement kind of bring an opportunity for you to do this, or is this more kind of like it was all pre-planned anyway, but just the opportunity just came along at the perfect time? Like,
yeah, I think this is always, and when you speak to others, ethnic minorities within the sport, it has been a build-up of bad experiences that we've had, and it's always been something that has been on my mind. And I think the main thing that happened with the whole George Floyd matter and everything coming about, what really struck me was, oh my God, it's 2020 and this stuff is still going on. Nothing has changed. So for me, it was a bit of a kick up the bum to actually make a difference. And I didn't want younger people who are obviously very, very talented at the moment that are coming up to experience the same things I did internationally. Because I have to say, although I have experienced racial discrimination within the sport, it has mostly been abroad. There has been a few microaggressions that have occurred within this, like here in the UK, but it's mostly internationally. So yeah, it really did give me a kick up the bum, the Black Lives Matter movement, and I just wanted to make a difference. And the opportunity arose. My video that I posted on my personal experiences reached out to a lot of people, and I received quite a lot of feedback on that, whether it be from others who have experienced the same thing or others who have seen others experience the same thing. And I just thought enough was enough and change had to happen.
Yes. And it's really sad that you went through those things abroad, because they're really things we can't control because they're abroad. But you've really grasped the opportunity to do something about the UK. And I think that'll be a good indicator for other countries perhaps to follow what we're doing. And I just wanted to move on with that point, in that fencing is quite a big spectrum sport. Like, people think you can only do fencing when you're young or when you're like middle aged, and then it's like a cut off, like finished. And like, just to try and speak about participation again and diversity, is there anything that is maybe being done towards like veteran fencing? Because I know a lot of people, older people, they're more maybe elitist themselves, but they still like to give to the sport and do it. Is there anything perhaps England fencing will look into or do in the future that addresses veterans getting more involved in sport?
Yeah, I think if anything, we need to shed more light on our veterans, because there are many people who are older that are still participating in fencing. My dad, one of them, not saying your old dad.
Of course, yeah, just remember.
But yeah, no, definitely. I think we need to start celebrating them more, because they're achieving just as much as we are. And maybe if we shed more light on it, then more people would continue fencing up until that age rather than stopping.
Yeah.
But definitely, we just need to celebrate people of all ages and of all backgrounds. And at the moment, I think we're focusing more on young people and the juniors and the seniors, and we need to focus on veterans. I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
So as a director, I would be looking to, shine the light more on those who have been kind of ignored over the past couple of years. So definitely.
Would an idea perhaps be to get them more involved into open competitions, or would there be like a reshuffling of the system of, I know, for example, England fencing, they used to do, or might still do, the Leon Paul system, where it's like under 11, under 13, under 15. Would it be possible maybe to create like a plus 50 age group for Leon Paul or something like that? Or is that something that's not being talked about? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely. I think that would be a great idea. And for it to be done on the same day as the normal competitions, because then we have a chance to interact with the veterans, and then that increases
the activity you were talking about.
Exactly. That includes communication, and it brings the community together more. Because I'm sure there are juniors out there who probably haven't interacted with a veteran, and there's so much they can learn from veterans.
Yeah, they're funny guys. They have so much experience, and on the piece, back to the mask thing again, you don't know who's beneath it. You never know. A veteran might be a really good sparring partner or a really good fencer to try new things on. So you're very right. Veterans do need this kind of spotlight, which they've not been given.
I know. There's so much we can learn as well, because most of these veterans are so experienced in fencing. There's things that we can learn from them that we can't learn anywhere else,
And just returning to a previous point, obviously you're very, very new to this role. Do you see yourself progressing through the years to something else to do with diversity and inclusion in sport? Maybe a higher governing body, moving to like perhaps British sport or something like that. Can you tell us a bit about maybe your aspirations with law as well? I know you study law, and is there maybe are you setting the scene for something coming together later on? Or is it just more your interest in law that you just do at university because why not?
Yeah, no, I'm very interested in law. I did my law undergrad and I'm currently doing my master's at the moment in law with my legal practice course, which is obviously going to help my knowledge on everything that I'm doing at the moment. But the term that I'm serving at England Fencing as a director is 4 years. So it's quite a long time for me to make some sort of a difference and begin to make a difference within the sport. I will be looking to do 2 terms, so hopefully that should give me enough time to make a substantial difference, especially for those that are next coming up as well. I haven't thought that far in any other governing bodies that I would like to participate in, but at work as well, I'm also part of the diversity inclusion group at work. So I'm also trying to help in other environments, whether it be sport or work, etc. But yeah, I'm busy.
busy. Well, Ayesha, it has been super cool to talk to you. I've learned a lot myself, and I hope other people watching this have learned stuff also. And are you okay with sharing your social media? People could perhaps get in contact with you and talk about problems they've witnessed or they've felt. It's really important, I think you really hit this on the head, to get people to connect and get people's thoughts out there and their experiences out there, because if you suffer in silence, I don't think you're going to help yourself much on the long run. We really need to get this going.
And I just want to highlight as well that this, when it comes to diversity, inclusion and discrimination and everything, it's been a subject that has been so awkward to talk about in the past, where a lot of people have probably just avoided speaking about it. But I want to highlight how positive all of this is, that we are speaking about it and we are making change, whether it be small at the moment. We're going to make change for our kids and our kids' kids, etc., and those coming up. So I'm so happy with the way things are going at the moment. And for those watching, if there's anyone that wants to speak to me about their experiences or ask for any advice or what I think on a particular issue, then feel free to reach out to me. My Facebook is just Ayesha Fihosy, and my Instagram is the same with an @ at the beginning.
We'll provide that in a second. Yeah. Well, if you have any questions about the podcast itself or about the topics we talked about or anything else, please contact me or Ayesha. But other than that, have a super day and stay safe. And see you, everyone.
Take care, everyone.